you hit Rails, new, and then the name of the project. So we'll call it demo models. Okay. -T will remove all the unit test files. Okay. So right now we'll get into testing later, and actually we won't be using unit tests for testing. We'll be using another gem called RSpec. But if you just -T option basically just gets rid of the extra extraneous files. Okay. So if I run this, it creates all my files for me. Okay, so much easier to start a project than with Django. You don't have to manually assemble all the other stuff. We won't be running sort of multiple apps kind of thing with Rails. You just let it run, okay, and it installs everything. So, uh-oh. What version of Rails? I should have tried this earlier. Let me see if this one starts. Okay, Rails S starts the server, but one of the gems didn't install, so I'm not sure if I'm going to have any problems or not. Seems like it's okay. Post 5,000? 3,000? Alright, good. Alright, it's fine. Alright, so we don't have to worry about that gem that didn't install. Yeah. Okay, so my Rails app is launched. Okay, that's it for launching a Rails app. Okay, Rails new for creating the project, Rails S for basically launching the server. Okay, now we're doing models, so I'm going to walk you through how you would actually set up your models for this. Okay, so first I'm going to open up the my Sublime file. Okay, so here you will. This is what your app looks like. Okay, it's a little hard to see. Let's do this. Or let me open up some of these things first. App, models, database. What else do you need? I think this is it for now. Okay. Let's do this too. Right. There's also a database that so let's look at that one. Okay, let's not look at that one. All right. Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'm just going to walk through what these files are. Desktop. Okay, all right. So this is what your file structure looks like. Okay, so most of your stuff is going to be under this app folder. Okay, all of your models files are going to be under here. Okay, after I create my models files, and then all your HTML files are going to be under here. Okay, this is that default HTML file, that like big top level template, right? And you're going to write individual ones, and this inside this file there's like a yield call that will call each of your individual HTML templates that get substituted in, like we talked about yesterday. Okay, this is the configuration file. In here, the database.yaml is where you specify what type of database you want to connect to, and like the configuration of what that database is. Okay. There's also a development.SQLite file. So this actually is your database. When you're running in development, you will be using SQLite 3 for your database. Okay, so if we were to open up this file, right? Okay, well it's empty right now because we haven't get it yet. But you would see the zeros and ones and stuff like this on Python. Database.yaml, this specifies what you're connecting to. You specify like in development, I want to use this. If for production I want to say use Postgres or MySQL, I would just change this, right? And I would set up the connection and stuff so I can connect to that server. Okay. And application.html.erb, here's that yield thing I was talking about. Okay, so but the rest of the stuff is the same, right? So you can just load your style sheets once and your JavaScript once, all your head tag, body tag once. Okay. So those are your files. You will also have a migrations which are not here yet. So let's go ahead and add stuff. Okay, so let's start with. So there's also this thing called a generator. Okay, Rails G model, where G stands for generator, and this will basically generate like your migration files. Okay, so when you all this does, the generator does, right, is it writes some code for you, so you don't have to type it out and make the files manually. Okay, so you could not use a generator and just go in like new file, save the file as this, write some code in it, go do the exact same thing, but it's just like a faster shortcut for being able to do that. Okay, it's a script set up to do that. So you say Rails G model, you give it the name of your class, which should be capitalized. So I'm going to make a user class, okay? And then I'm going to specify the fields I want on it. Okay, I've also put together a cheat sheet for you guys for Rails, so I'll send that out in a bit, and we can build this off of the cheat sheet as well. So this is my Rails cheat sheet. Okay, so Rails new. Okay, $sign means you run this in terminal. Okay, this is how you create the model, Rails G model. Okay, so I'm going to create a user, and I'm going to pass. This is my attribute column name in the database. Okay, called name, and I'm specifying the type, which is a string. Okay, so if I were to run Rails G model user name : string, this will basically create my user model with name field and string attributes. Okay, so run this. You want to be careful with capitalization and stuff. Okay, so make sure and singular, just plural. Okay, so these should be like this. Okay, so you will see what this thing did, right? It created two files for me. This db/migrate 2017 blah 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 create users, and it also created a models file for me called user.rb. Okay, so let's take a look at those two files. So migrate is under this db folder over here. Okay, it wasn't there earlier when I took that snapshot because we hadn't run a Rails G model yet. But if you look at the migration file, it looks like this. Okay, so similar to with Python and Django, right? When you make migration files, what the migration file actually is instructions that Rails runs in order to create the actual database. Okay, so like remember you have Rails code, right? And this gets translated into like a great database code in the SQL database. Okay, so here it's kind of simplified. You just specify what you want the table to contain. Okay, so I'm basically making a change. Right, so it's define change. Okay, and I'm going to create a table called users table. Rails took care of the pluralization of lowercasing for us, right? Database table names should usually be lowercase and plural because you have multiple entries of users. So even though I did Rails G model user, capital U, user singular, right? The migration is still users, okay? And then for this table, I'm going to create a string column called name, okay? So that's basically it. I can then also look at my models file, user.rb, which is just my user class. We have a template for it. We don't really have anything in it yet. Okay, so just class user. The user, this means it inherits. Okay, so it inherits from application record, which is another class. Okay, so this is a lot of the default functionality you need in order to create new objects, such as like user.new, user.create, all that stuff. Okay, so once you have this, you just like with Python, you had to do make migrations and then migrate. We still have to migrate the files, right? We don't actually have the database yet. At this point, we've only made the migration files, which is the script for making the database. Okay, so we need to run Rails rake db migrate. Okay, rake db : migrate. Rake stands for Ruby make, which is a Rails or Ruby like set of scripts basically. Okay, so we run this rake db migrate. And it creates this table for us. Okay, so now I have a users table. Okay, and it kept that timestamp. Now Rails, you actually have like a history of all your migrations inside this migrate folder. Okay, and Rails keeps track of which ones it has run. Okay, so if I can do rake db migrate status. will show that I have one migration, okay, that is up. That means it has already run, okay? If I had run this prior to running RakeDB migrate, it would say status down. Okay. So now that I have my user objects, okay, I can do Rails C. C stands for console, and I can go into the Rails console. Okay. Okay. All right, we'll do that in a little bit too. I'm just going to do basic make a user object. Okay, so I can say user, user.all. Okay, so user.all gets you all the user objects, right? It also returns an array, right? And then if I want to look at my user class, this is what it consists of. Okay, so I have an ID for the user ID, name for the attribute I created, and then the timestamps thing automatically creates a created at and update at for me. Okay, so if I want to make a new user, okay, I can do user.new, u1 equals user.new, and I'm going to just specify the name is okay. All right, so that's my new user. User.new, I pass in the attributes I want to set. Okay, now this is considered with user.new. It's not considered in the database yet. Okay, so if I do user.all, I believe it will not show. Okay, it's not there yet. Okay, so it is the user has been created. It's in memory, but it's not saved to the database yet. Okay, so after you create a user, you have to also save it. Okay, so u1.save will save the user. Okay, so after I save the user, we have this transaction, and you can actually see the SQL query that ran, right? Insert into users, name, created, updated, values, etc., right? And that's how we create the user, okay? Now, don't recall if user.all will work right now. It does, okay.
So the created app and the updated app, those are default values when you create a new object?
Yeah, because in that migration file, we had this t.timestamps that covers the created app and updated app. Okay, any questions on this so far?
But if you add field, you have to do the model and migrate over?
Yes. Okay, so there's two ways to add the field, okay? One way is you can make a new migration that is specifically for adding the field. Okay, it's like add column migration. Okay, the other one you can do is you can change this migration. Okay, so let's say I wanted to add a last name field. Okay, if I were to just do this, right, and I went back to my shell, I exited my shell, I went back to the shell, I went back to the console again, right? Do you think the last name field will be there? Not yet, because you have to migrate it. Okay. Now, if I do this, okay, I added t.lastname, okay, or sorry, t.string last name, okay. So let's say I did a RakeDB migrate, okay. So I'm gonna exit this. I did a RakeDB migrate, okay. Okay, nothing happened. Okay. The reason nothing happened is because if we were to again look at our status, right, it's already up, and Rails just keeps track of which ones have already run. So as far as it knows, right, this migration has already run. It's like done with it. It doesn't go back and check that everything has been like run correctly yet. Okay. So the way to work around this, okay, is prior to adding this line, okay, you do what's called a RakeDB rollback. Okay, so what this does is it will basically go back one step in migration order. Okay, so you do RakeDB rollback. And then this gets reverted. Okay, so this reversion, you can see what happens, right? The table was dropped. Okay, so my users table has been thrown away. I no longer have this user object, right, that I created earlier, right? It's gone. And if I did RakeDB migrate status now, it should say down. Okay, so now that it's how things been wiped, right? If I were to then go back and add this, okay, and then I migrate it, then we'll have the field. Okay, now it's important that you don't. Sometimes, okay, if I had tried rolling back while this was here, okay, like let's say I had, migrated, it was up, I added this line, right, and then I rolled back, okay. Depending on how this is written and what it is, it might throw you an error, okay. In this particular case, I think it's okay because it's just dropping the table anyways, but it could be looking for this column to like remove, right? And if the column doesn't exist to remove, then you could have problems. Okay, so what I would generally recommend as like the safe rule of thumb, right, when you're doing migrations, is that whenever you change a migration file, always make sure it's down first. Okay, so you always roll it back first, make sure it's in a state that like it's safe to make changes, right? Because when you roll it back, right, it's just you don't want it to have to roll back something else that it never rolled forward to start with, right? Like it can't remove this last name column field if you never added it in the first place, right? So you don't have this line, you roll back, and then after you roll back, and then you've confirmed that it says down, you add this column, and then you can migrate. Okay, so now if I migrate again, and then I go into my console, I can do user to all, and I can see my user, and now I have a last name field. Okay.
So does the rollback every instance of the migration?
Only the most recent. Right? So if you wanted to roll back a few different, like a number of them, you can either run the rollback command like 3-4 times, right? Or you can run another command where you say rake3 rollback, and you say like, I think you say like step equals 2 or something, and then you just go rollback 2 steps. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
When you said you did the reverts back to the rollback, I'm really confused on this.
Okay.
Does it get rid of the information that was in there? Because you said it gets rid of the table,
So it depends on the rollback, right? Now, it depends on the migration. Okay, if your migration created a table, then rolling it back will delete the table.
I mean, like, okay, you have a table, and let's say now you have name, and that's like just a first name, so you're putting up the first name, and now you want to add a last name.
Right.
So when you roll back, does it lose all those first names?
Yes.
And so when you
Because your original migration, okay, remember there's more than one type of migration, right? There's your initial migration, which is creating the table, right, alongside all the columns. And so whatever you roll back, you will basically undo whatever the migration does, right? So if that original migration created a table along with a bunch of columns and you added data for it, if you roll it back, you will lose the entire table. And if you lose the table, you'll lose all your data. Now, if the migration you created was not creating a table, but rather it was just adding a column, right? Then if you roll that back, you will just delete that single column. So you would lose all the data in that particular column, but you would not lose all the data in your other columns. Yeah, you can think of it a little bit like that. Yeah. Does that make sense, Jesse?
Sort of.
So it's the method for not being direct. You want to add a column.
Yeah, so it's a different migration. I don't have that one memorized. There's a Rails add column migration. And it's like this: Rails generate migration, add email to users, and then you specify the column. So you actually specify add like what you want to call it, and then I guess it should be. I don't know if this part's convention or if it has to be this way, but add email to users. You specify the table, right? And then the migration will look something like this: add a column. So there's all sorts of migrations. I mean, you can look at the Rails docs to learn all the different ones. But I don't typically memorize all the generators. I memorize like the most common ones, like just making a new model. And then if you ever needed to do something like fancy in here, like that was a little different for some reason, you could always just type it, right? So there are probably special generators for adding other things, like for instance, if you want to add like a foreign key or whatever it is, kind of thing. But you can also just add that in yourself, or have some sort of validation. All right. Any other questions? Okay, so that's how you create your models. I'm going to create another model. Okay, so let's create a post table or a blogs table. Okay, let's say users can have multiple blogs. Posts, blogs. No, that's good blogs. Okay, all right. Someone, how do I make the generator for this? Yeah. Yes, class name. Yeah. And then let's just say content is a string. Okay. And then here, references. Should we say references or colon references? I forget. Okay. Context. User colon references. Okay, so you specify the table you're going to join into, okay, and then colon references. Okay, so this allows us to get a join. Okay, so like this.
Lowercase. The class name.
The class name is post.
For user.
Oh yeah. It should be lowercase. Yeah.
Is it a one-to-many?
So this will be a one-to-many by default. Yes. So we created some more files. Okay. We have this second migration file now. Okay, content. We actually added the foreign key for us. Right. References user. Foreign key is true. Okay. So if you were to do rake db migrate status now, what would we expect? Up for. So up for the first one, down for the second one. Right. So we have already migrated the first one, I think. Right. So yeah, create users is up because we have already migrated it, but down for the post. Right. We only created the migration files. We haven't actually run the migrations yet. Okay. So if we want this to be available, right, we just run the migrate, and that will make them both up. Okay. So now, how do we go to the console? Rails C. Okay. And the first time you do like user, like you might just user.connection to establish connection. You can also just call user.all or something. And that'll be all of them. I did post, right? Post.all. Okay. Okay. So you can create those. So I'm going to create a user. Okay, so create is very similar to new, except it combines new and save. Okay, so you should automatically do both. So maybe user.create name colon chain last name colon. Okay. So I create a user, and then let's say I want to create a post, right? Then I create p1 equals post.create. Okay, and I can say content equals content 1, okay, and then user equals, what do you guys think goes here? Object, yeah, object. So you number of arguments. I didn't make it. Oh, I didn't set it to you one. What did I say?
That's user ID.
Maybe we just create it.
Yeah, it says user ID, but I don't think you need to do it that way. All right, let's try something else. P1 dot. Well, you guys can see something else. Okay, P1 dot new. What's that new? Okay, so if I do this, oh, it doesn't look like that either. Content. That's not gonna work. But I mean, no, that's not gonna do anything. But I don't think that's not the problem. So there's something else going on here. Wrong number of fields. Right, it said, what did it say? It said value number of r given to expected 0 dot dot 1. Mm,
You're saying these ID equals integer.
oh, it's not supposed to be equal. That's why. It's supposed to be a colon. Okay, user ID equals. You can so you can actually do this both ways. You can do user ID equals u1 dot ID, or you can do user equals u1. So it's good. No. Sorry, what's not like now?
We just call it the user ID so it says it.
Let me go back to that. Alright. I'm gonna go back to this content equals this. Did I do that? There we go. Okay, alright. Alright. Okay, so the other way, so yeah, this is like a syntax problem. So, hash rockets is like the old way of assigning keys to values, right? So I can do this. I think I can also do this.
Did you say hash rocket?
Yeah, this is called a hash rocket. Equal sign greater than. It's called a hash rocket. Okay, so I'm converting these to symbols. Okay, so that works. Okay, and then you can convert this combination of a colon with the hash rocket to, I think it's like this. Okay, all right, so that works. And then, but I don't, this doesn't seem good. Oh, that works. I don't know what's wrong with it. Maybe it was a space.
Well, we use equals before.
Use equals before. I thought I tried this combination earlier though. Yeah.
So
Okay.
equals is not.
Yeah, equals does not work. It does not work. It needs to be colon or hash rockets. Okay, so this is the new post. Okay, so I have the post object, right? If my post was not valid for some reason, I can do p1.valid question mark. Okay, this will say false. So if you had some validations in place, then this would say false, and you can actually do p1.errors, and it would tell you a list of all your errors. Okay, now there's no errors here, so nothing shows up, but otherwise something would show up under messages.
What would cause it to be invalid?
If I had like a validation requirement, like username must be present, like first name must be present, and it was like nil or something like that. Okay, so let's try this. P1 dot user equals nil. Okay, P1 dot valid. Yeah, there we go. No user. It's not valid. Okay, so P1 dot errors. Right? It says user must exist. User error blank. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward, right? This has pretty good error messaging. Okay, so something can't create for some reason, right? If I try to do P1 dot save right now, it would say it tried to do the transaction and then it rolled back the transaction. So it didn't work. Okay. You can also do P1 dot save with an exclamation mark. Okay. The exclamation mark basically has a little bit more overhead, but it will like throw you an error for if it doesn't work. So you'll get this big long mass, and it'll tell you at the top, validation failed, user must exist. All right, so because we have this errors, right, we need to basically add a user. So p1.user equals p1. Okay, so I'm assigning the post to the first user, and now my p1 has a user ID. Okay, now alternatively, I could do p1.user ID equals p1.id. okay, or p1.user ID. So all the same thing.
So do like p1.post.
So you can do u1.posts, but I think when you find method post, yeah, we don't have it yet. We can't do it. Well, I'll add that in a second. Okay. All right. So right now this is just creating the post. Okay. So I have this post, and then I want to save it. Okay. So now I have a user ID. It's valid. Okay. It's valid. Okay. I can save it. Okay. So now I have post. Okay. So I can do user.all. And do post.all.
So the exclamation point, is that like a verbose?
It's like kind of like a verbose thing. Exclamation mark is two things. Okay, so one is, it depends on the context of when the exclamation mark shows up. In this context, it's basically a kind of a more verbose thing where it's going to throw an exception if it fails. And then the other time exclamation can happen is it stands for like it will change the object that it's called on. Okay. So if you do something like foo.downcase, exclamation mark, foo is going to get changed. Okay, so like if foo was okay, if I do foo.downcase, it'll print as a lowercase, right? But if I type foo, it's still uppercase. Okay, if I do foo.downcase exclamation mark, and I put foo again, foo has changed to the downcase version. Okay, so exclamation mark also means like dangerous, right? It can change an object or something like that.
When you do the dot create, is that still validating or whatever you do?
It will still run the validation, but it will just fail, right? If it's not valid. Splitting it up just allows you to sort of check in between. So what I will sometimes do is like if I have a really complicated object for some reason, like I'm not sure about what type it is. Actually, you guys saw me do this, right? It wasn't working, so I switched over to .new, and then try to like basically work with it until I got it to work, right? And you could just add like one field at a time, and that way it can be in an invalid state while you're sort of building the object up, right? And then once you have the complete object, you know it's like valid, then I save it afterwards, right? So it's just good for like sort of debugging, figuring out how to do something, I guess. Okay. Is there anything else I wanted to cover? I'm going to do that relationship thing, but I want to do something else first. So you guys noticed that like user u1.posts does not work right now, right? So we're going to get that to work in a second. Okay. Before we go to that, I'm just going to step back a second. Okay, so here's your SQLite file, right? Similar to the Python Django one. Okay, it's a bunch of gobbledygook, but I can't read it. Okay, but this is actually where your database is. And then there's also this file called schema.rb. Okay, this is not your database. It's important to remember that. Okay, schema.rb is a record, according to Rails, of what your database looks like. Okay, so it's there as like a reference for you. Okay, so this matches what our migration files did. Okay, and like if you had multiple migration files that modified the same table, it would all get sort of like put together in here, right, into like a nice, easy to read format. And you can see that I have a post table and I have a users table. Okay, but again, this is not our database. So if I were to delete this, our Rails app would still run. Okay, but it's a useful record, basically checking what it does. And it is important to keep this up to date and not just like willy-nilly delete it, because when you are doing testing and you're going to make a test database, the test database comes out of this. So the test database uses the schema.rb to build a test database, and then you can run your tests against that. Okay.
What is the t.index?
What's the what?
Your posts.
What? T dot what?
Index.
This thing?
What is that one?
This thing. Okay. This means that you are creating an index for user ID. So this is okay. When you create a foreign, I don't remember if I talked about this in Python. When you create a foreign key field, right, like this user ID, right, this line right here, t.integer user ID, right, this refers to this this column, right? Okay. When you are needing to grab a post from the post table to like a join SQL statement or u1.posts, you need to find the appropriate user ID in there, right? In this table. Okay, so without an index, what you would do is it would just read through every single row in the database table until it finds it. Okay, but if you create an index, you actually have this other column, right? Okay, this is like user ID index. Okay, and this is you're indexing this column. So what you're actually doing is you're hashing. Okay, so you hashes. You guys cover that this week? No, you guys haven't hashes, right?
You did it.
You didn't Ruby. You guys have worked with hashes, but you've not learned the data structure for hashes. Yeah, but do you guys understand how the fundamental algorithms for hashes work? Stack 3 people understand it? Are you guys working with hashes? Dictionaries? Do you know how the database architecture, or like the structure of a hash, like how a hash actually works? How the dictionary actually works? No? Okay. Alright, you guys will learn it later then. Okay. Okay, I'll give you a brief overview of hashes now, I guess. Okay, so when you have all these, like when this user ID is really long, right? So it's like 1,000 entries or 10,000 entries. Reading through every single one of them is really slow. Okay, so what happens is it'll take like a number, okay, and then it'll hash it to a specific bucket. Okay, so let's say you have like 1,000 entries, right? One way I can read it faster, okay, is I put 10 buckets. And actually, this is easier actually with, let's say it was like a word, okay? Let's say you had a word like cat, right? If you want to read through find a word that matches throughout the entire table, you could go through and read every single word, right? Or you could organize it so that this is the bucket for A, this is the bucket for B, this is the bucket for C. And then it's been mapped to a specific bucket, okay? And then when you're looking for cat, you know that cat maps to the C, and then you're just going to go through here. Okay, so you just divided the time it takes to look up something by 26, right? Because there's 26 letters. Okay, so this works because it's based on letters, right? But you can hash anything, right? It doesn't have to be hashed based on specific letter, right? You can take any sort of combination of letters and just say like, okay, based on whatever this number thing converts to into the numbers, like with some sort of random formula, it's going to fit into one of these random buckets, right? And then I can calculate that, right, with whatever string I have, find out which bucket's going to be in, and then I can just look through that bucket. Okay, so it's like you can look for something much faster. So that's what indexing is doing actually. It's creating like some other like thing here for you to be able to look up faster.
Organizing and kind of grouping by the user ID.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that you can so you can look it up faster.
Okay.
Yeah. So it makes it run faster. That's all it is. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so that's schema. And then I showed you the SQLite database. I showed you guys rollback. All right, I will cover the relationships. Okay. So, here u1.post does not work, right? We can make it work by adding this thing here, has many posts. Okay, so this is when you make a change here. Okay, it's basically this is a method called posts, and you're giving an individual user object a method called posts. Okay? Yeah, it's like related name, yeah. And then, did I forget any syntax for this? Let's see. As many posts. No, I think that's it. That's all you need to know. Okay? It will, by default, based on the naming of this being posts, it will go find the post table. Okay, so there's a lot of convention happening in Rails, and if you name things correctly in terms of lowercase, singular, plural, stuff like that, right, it will just go and find it. Okay, you can make custom versions of this, right, but then you have to add other code to do it. Okay, so you just follow this straight, narrow convention way, and then it just does all this kind of stuff for you, basically. Okay, so after you have this, I think you need to restart your console. Okay, so u1 equals user.find id equals 1. Okay, now I can do u1.posts, and it will give you back the posts. Okay, so I want you guys to keep in mind that this is a method. Okay, like, you know, it's just one line, but you're actually creating a method called post, and this does not make any change to the database, right? We already did the migrations. Changes to the database are done through our migration files, which are over here, right? This is really just for creating that convenience method, so you can do u1.posts. Okay, this is called an active record relationship. All right, any other questions? Let me see if there's anything else. Console, okay. When I do Rails C, right, again, it's opening up the Ruby console in the context of Rails. If you did just IRB, you would just be opening up Ruby in general. Okay, so if you're working with the Rails project specifically, you want to do Rails C as opposed to just IRB. Okay, so we cover this, cover this, cover this, cover this, cover all these. Drop would be to drop a database. And then go to that. Okay, belongs to is the other side of this. So like you can have many posts. Right now, if I were to do p1, p1 equals post dot find id equals 1. Okay, right. You can also do p1 equals post dot first. It's a convenience method. Okay, you get the first post. If I were to do p1 dot user, yeah, almost done. Okay, yeah, I'll go.
We're heading out, guys. As soon as you're done, please.
Okay. All right. So p1.user already works, I think, because the post model, which is here, has a belongs to extra. Okay. So the inverse of the has one or has many is the belongs to. Okay. So belongs to goes on the object that has the foreign key. Okay. And whereas the has one has many goes on the one that does not. That's being referenced. Okay. If I took away this method, then user.p1.user would not work. Okay. And then I think there's one other thing I want to cover. Almost done. All right. Okay. There's this thing called. This is how you do a validation. Okay. So if I were to add this line to my user, okay, then I would no longer be able to create a user without a name. It would be invalid when I have it. Okay. So if I were to do this, so here, u equals user.first, right? U.valid, no, u1 equals user.new, u1.valid, say false, u1.errors, say name cannot be blank. Okay, so that's adding a validation, and then the last thing is there's also this thing called an active record callback. Okay, so a callback is basically a piece of code that runs like you define first, but it runs like before or after like an event, after something happens. Okay, so if I do before save capitalized name, okay, that means I'm going to run this method capitalized name every time before it saves. Okay, so if I were to add this to user.rb, like that, and it can be a private method if I'm only ever gonna if I'm never gonna call it directly. Okay, then if I were to create a new user, I can actually statement already Rails C u1 equals user.create then run that, and then it will name has been capitalized. Okay, so u1 is now I can actually actualize it. I didn't save it. Okay, so it didn't actually get capitalized, but it ran the metric. Okay, so this is called an active record callback, and that's how you can like link additional functionality before after save. There's a whole bunch of different ones, like before save, after save, all that stuff. Okay. All right, that's it. I think that's everything. No one has any questions? Does anyone have any questions? No. Oh, actually, one last thing. There's a seeds.rb file also. Okay. When you're creating your seed data, you can write commands into here. Okay, so you can do like user.create name like string or something like that. Okay, if you can make as many commands as you want, and then you can also run rake pbc. Okay, that will run all the commands. So for instance, okay, if I want to do that, right? Rake pbc. There you go. Name has been capitalized. Okay, it created it just here. Okay, so if you want to like keep track of all your seed data, you know, you can put in here so that if you ever do roll back everything, right, just run the seed and then everything's created again. Yeah. Okay. So that's that. All right, I think that is everything. Did I forget anything? Yeah. This stuff we'll cover later. Yes, it will. Yeah, it will. Unless you have like a validation that you have like unique names or something like that. Okay. You guys can. I'll send out this cheat sheet. You guys can read through this later if you want to. There's just other ways of doing queries. Okay. All these alternatives. There's like so many different ways to do things like this. Okay. This is all these like convenient stuff. All right. So that is our lecture at 2:30. Okay. I want to kind of redo this again with anyone who feels like they're not grasping everything. Okay, so my recommendation is that I'm going to send out this lecture video. Okay, and then if you can feel like you absorbed everything in here, right? You can also walk through the video and make sure you have everything you feel like you need to learn and understand, right? Then you do not need to come to that session. Okay. Otherwise, at 2:30, I'll basically be redoing this session, except for anyone who wants to join can bring their computer, and then we will just walk through all the commands together. Okay. So it'll be very, very slow. Okay. So if you feel like you don't need it, then don't come. But if you come, then it's an opportunity to, get hands-on practice doing it, and also ask me any additional questions you have as you're doing it. Okay, so same as what we did in Python. Okay, we'll do that at 2:30. All right, thanks everyone.